For the record, this video has nothing to do with the drama that's going on. Kaiser and I have been talking about these videos we made long before all this other dreck started making the rounds of internet drama. I have no desire to get involved in it, give my opinions, or take sides. The most that I'll say is that I have nothing but hearsay to go off of, so I don't really believe either side as of right now. I think I'd be surprised if the majority of stuff said about Lily wasn't true, but if I'm being blunt, there are enough holes to be skeptical about both sides. Any negative opinion I have, and have always had on Lily, is based on her shitty opinions on writing, and how she presents them in her content. That's all I'm going to talk about, that's all I'm ever going to talk about in regards to Lily, and I wouldn't touch this drama with the goddamn power pole. At its maximum length. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's not a bad thing, but I'm sure you can find out. Now let's get into the video. Knock knock, who's there? Me, of course.
I am the one who knocks.
Finally making a video that isn't about fate. Lily Orchard has that effect on people. But, of course, I don't just have her to thank. So, thank you, Kaiser Shounen, for having me on as a guest on your coverage of her Mary Sue video. And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend that you do. Kaiser did a really good job breaking down the whole thing. Like, there's a lot to break down in even a minute of Lily's rambling, and I'm impressed we made it longer than even halfway without dying of an aneurysm just trying to decipher her nonsense. Which we're gonna talk more about. And I'm no stranger to the trope of the Mary Sue myself. I've made 2 videos on it in the past. Though it's been a while, I still stand by what I said in both, so feel free to check those out before continuing. Especially when talking about the Mary Sues, a trope that a lot of people have misconstrued over the years, to the point where there isn't even a consistently useful definition anymore. Lily's video is evident enough of that, and it's also part of the reason I'm passionate about the trope and why I wanted to talk about it when Kaiser was writing his script. Because I think it's a valuable term for a very specific and even prolific problem in stories that people may not have been paying much attention to, probably because it doesn't have a name other than Mary Sue. And that isn't even as well recognized among communities since the push for the claim that it is just a sexist buzzword. What I want to push for is to give the word its meaning back. The same meaning that Paula Smith had intended to satire when she wrote her parody, A Trekkie's Tale, where the name of the trope originated from. And I hope that people adopt that kind of definition that people like Kaiser and I use, because it's going to lose its meaning and may even make the trope even more prevalent in stories, unless we can reach a consensus on what the term means. So for the uninitiated, what is a Mary Sue? Put simply, a Mary Sue is a character who is favored by the plot to the point in which that favoritism directly impacts the story in consistently negative ways. Alright, that's nice, but didn't we go over this in Kaiser's video a while back? What's the point of revisiting this? It's one thing to talk about the trope mechanically, it's another to examine it in action. To really break down characters and understand what does and doesn't make them a Mary Sue. And I could take some examples of characters from stories I love and hate and explain why they are or aren't a Sue, but since Lillian is clearly such an expert on the trope, let's just ask her. She's got a number of examples of characters she thinks are Sues, and even claims that they're better for it. Since, you know, a Mary Sue is a character that we need more of, apparently. And maybe by exploring these characters in the context of the Mary Sue trope, we might learn a little bit more about that trope, and why Lily is horribly wrong about it. So let's get started. What do you have for us first?
See, to hear people talk, the idea of a character being hyper-competent, always right, and who just kicks all kinds of ass is just objectively bad writing because good characters struggle and earn everything and yada yada yakety schmackety. And that's bullshit, and I know that's bullshit, and you know that's bullshit because hyper-competent Mary Sues are fucking fun.
You really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
And we're off to a great start with this first example. Of all the clips you could have shown John McClane being hyper-competent, you picked a one-liner. Because one-liners are common for Mary Sues, I guess? If anything, John McClane is just regular competent. You have a guy who starts off the story unarmed, unarmored, and barefoot, which comes back later when he's stepping on glass and struggling to get around the place. He has to work for his victories. He has to work just to get a gun, which is part of the reason why people prefer the first movie over the others, because the rest of the series just devolves into basic action movie cliches involving insanely over-the-top scenes with a guy who's just a cop. Except only the first movie actually treats him like the just a cop guy that he really is. I feel like action movie heroes are an especially noticeable misconception that people have with identifying Mary Sues. That and superheroes. And I think it's because... well, I don't really know where it comes from. I think it's just the confidence the character gives off in conjunction with how much they do on their own. But even then, John was kind of a subversion of that for the time. He struggles to get the police to believe there's a terrorist attack at Nakatomi Plaza. And after that, he still struggles to get help even when they do show up. Whether because of the extensive security that the villains use to their advantage, the weapons they have to keep the cops out, or the general incompetence from those above, things do not go in John's favor, and he has to work to overcome that. That is the opposite of a Mary Sue. Okay, what's next?
Turn off the light show and prove to me you can beat me without.
Is this really the example you want to go with? I thought the point of these were to convince people that characters they like are Mary Sues themselves, not reinforce that the bad ones do in fact fit the trope. You're not trying to convince people who already agree with you to begin with and drive anyone else away. Are you, Lily? So this was one especially surprising because it shows a lack of understanding on Lily's part about why people dislike the trope to begin with, or even just a lacking desire to find out at all. Sure, hypercompetence is something people dislike, but Lily doesn't want to ask why. Part of the reason why people dislike characters like Rey and Kirito is because of how boring their stories are due to their hypercompetence. Even when their victories make sense, because of how powerful they are, the conflict becomes less engaging as a result. We're not on the edge of our seats wondering how they're going to overcome the next obstacle, something that even the best stories can make you do even if you already know how it ends. Instead, we're just nodding our heads, going along with an extremely one-sided conflict. The story has shown us it's going to make them powerful beyond reason, so we have every reason to believe they'll overcome whatever else is thrown at them. But villains? Antagonists? The guys who we want to see lose in the end? Making them hypercompetent doesn't detract from that tension, it adds to it. It becomes the obstacle that our hero has to overcome or outsmart in some way. Depending on the story, a hypercompetent villain can even out a character who would have otherwise become a Mary Sue without them. Sure, seeing Darth Vader mow down a group of randos is pretty cool because we've not seen something like that on the big screen since, well, ever, I suppose. But it's not like we're rooting for the guy. We don't want him to get the plans and subvert the rebellion because he's the bad guy. You know, one of the leaders of the space Nazis in this story? If anything, a scene like this is more tense because how are a bunch of rando troopers going to fend off Vader in time for them to escape with the plans to the Death Star? So, yeah, villains don't make very good Mary Sues. Neither does Darth Vader.
That was for Thane, you son of a bitch!
Okay, this is going to be a bit tricky because I don't have any direct references due to not having played Mass Effect since I was in high school. Look, watching films to get up to speed on Lily's piss-poor examples is one thing, but playing an excessive amount of time on video games just for a quick video less than an hour long is another. I already don't have anything to say on KOTOR and WoW, but it does raise a couple interesting questions about what constitutes a Mary Sue in a video game. Wouldn't it just be the same thing as any other medium? I mean, yes, in the sense that so long as the character fits the definition I gave earlier, then they are a Sue. But in what way does it fit that definition is the question. You've added another dimension to your story by telling it through an interactive medium. And that's important because now, whether the character is hypercompetent is going to depend on you, the player. Your knowledge and skills will reflect how competent that character is. Their challenges are your challenges. You not only witness their trials, but you go through them yourself. Even if the character appears to be hypercompetent, if the story makes you earn it, why shouldn't they get to look cool? And if it doesn't challenge you, I'd either blame that on the gameplay or assume that's because you're on an easier difficulty. But not really something I'd put on the story. That's just talking about the protagonist, and there's another NPC character that Lily mentions, and again, there's nothing really that I can say confirming whether she's right or wrong about Kreia, but I've heard nothing but praise about the character and almost no piece of evidence, even in her own video, that people ever hated her. What are the odds that this is just more context Lily is leaving out? And there's gonna be more of that ahead, so why slow things down now? Okay, who do we have next?
But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
Alright, Lily, this time you might actually have a point. It's just not the one you're making. I had rewatch taken in preparation for making this video, and Brian Mills is by no means a Mary Sue, but if he was, it really doesn't help your point that Mary Sues are good. Mostly because, despite the film still being good, it suffers from problems that are similar to movies about Sues. So even if you could show that he's a Sue, good luck with that by the way, you still have to explain why being a Sue is a good thing. Yes, he is very competent, it makes sense why he's so competent, and there's no contradiction with that hypercompetence, but it does diminish some of the stakes when there isn't anyone quite on par with him to adequately raise the stakes when the story needs to. It's not like it isn't challenged, but it's not challenged to the same degree as other characters on this list, or even other characters that we've already talked about. There's definitely conflict to be invested in, but for a lot of the movie, the conflict likes to stay in this very middle point, you might say. When it comes time for the rising action, the stakes never go much higher than they were about halfway through the story. Sure, there's a moment when he gets captured and he has to get out, but it's short-lived. And by that point, the conflict might as well be over. The only thing left to do is make it to the boat at the K on time. And, I mean, what's gonna stop him that he hasn't already overcome? Even the final action sequence is just more of the same that we've already seen, and he never really gets challenged in the same way that John McClane does in the third act of his film, or a lot of other action movie heroes for that matter. It's a similar problem to the Mary Sue, in the sense that you have a character who doesn't exactly go through challenges that really raise the tension that much more throughout the story, though for a true Mary Sue, it is far more noticeable than this. The stakes of the story are brought down not just because he's so competent, but because the story never throws the kind of challenges his way that raise the tension of the story to a suitable climax. But even then, this is the worst problem I've seen in the film, and it's not really that big, if that speaks at all to how much the film still holds up. And in fairness, there's nothing that really breaks as a result of him being competent. At best, it's maybe brought down a bit, but still a very good action movie all around. The thing that makes him not a Mary Sue, though, is that everything he succeeds at is through his own skills and very limited resources. He has to use his creativity and wit in order to overcome his obstacles, and his victories don't rely on an excessive amount of luck, convenience, or contrivance. He has less than 96 hours after his daughter is kidnapped to fly out to Paris and find her, otherwise she'll never be seen again. And that remains a constant fact throughout the story's runtime up until the climax. And he has to accomplish this while international security are also trying to hunt him down and expel him from the country. So the story still has stakes. It just kind of feels like there should be more. In a way, I think Brian isn't a Sue for the same reason video game characters like Shepard aren't Sues. Just because a character succeeds often doesn't mean they're not challenged. I can believe Brian Mills will die if he's shot. I don't believe Captain Marvel would ever lose because I don't believe her villains have the capacity to kill her, given how powerful she is. In the end, I don't think he's a Mary Sue, but I also don't think Taken is the best example to point to when you're making an argument that Mary Sues are good, actually. Like, there's a lot of other action movie characters from films a lot better written than this that you could point to. You know, like in the end, Okay, I knew whatever else you had was gonna be wrong, but really? Really? Are you just gonna throw out every action movie hero in existence? Have you even watched Raiders of the Lost Ark? The opening scene has him losing the idol to his rival, who, throughout the movie, pretty much subverts him at the end at every turn. He uncovers the Ark's location and leads the bad guys right to it, before being left to die in a sealed tomb full of venomous snakes. This scene that you're showing, it's part of a much larger chase where Indy is trying to rescue Miriam after she was kidnapped, and he fails to rescue her by the end. He actually thinks she's dead because of him. And of course, there's the end where Indy can't bring himself to blow up the Ark, and gets captured because he couldn't bring himself to destroy such a valuable piece of history just to spite Dr. Belloc. For fuck's sake, he's up against a small army of Nazis, and it's not easy for him. It makes no sense to call him a Sue. And yet, there's been this prevalent fixation on calling characters like Indiana Jones and Bruce Wayne Mary Sues just because they're good-looking or have a lot of money and also happen to save the day in an entertaining fashion. And it's one that pops up so much in discussions like these that it feels too much like a deflection than an actual point. Really, I don't even think it's worth responding to. It's just pointing at beloved male characters and then expecting claims to stick. At that rate, you might as well call Superman a Mary Sue. You knew I was gonna say that before I even said it.
Let's see. Satellite hijacking, attempted murder, terrorism, and oh yes, speeding. I'm gonna have to ask you boys to pull over.
Superhero characters, notably Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne, tend to get pointed at as examples that are Mary Sues, actually, despite how beloved they are. Or at least that's my experience. And it's really confusing when you point at these kinds of characters with such a general statement because which one are you even talking about? You can't say that every iteration of Superman is a Mary Sue because some are not. Some of my favorite Superman stories deal with using his power as an example for others with power to follow. If Spider-Man's motto is, "With great power comes great responsibility," then Superman's motto is, "With the greatest power comes the greatest responsibility." He has the kind of power that can solve all kinds of problems worldwide, and it's not just a matter of using that power or not, it's also how. How do you act in the best interest possible for everyone, even when everyone is fighting amongst one another? Superman could easily kill anyone whom he deems as a bad guy, but constantly has to keep his powers in check because he understands that even with a slightly different outlook from how he handles things now, he could very quickly turn into the same kind of villain that he tries to stop. Yes, he has power, but that power doesn't negate the conflict like the Mary Sue does. In Superman vs. the Elite, he is tested by a group of metahumans who want to deal out their own brand of justice by killing the people they consider evil, and Superman struggles to act as a moral opponent and an example to everyone else that what they stand for is not a good thing. It's an excellent demonstration of the kind of conflict that Superman has to face every day with people who are even slightly less powerful than he is, taking delicate care not to break something, to break someone. And he almost gives in, going on a merciless rampage against the upstarts that we've been led to believe were truly more powerful than him, as he brutally takes them out one by one. Or so we think. You've probably already seen the ending, but I won't spoil it for you and ask that you check it out for yourself. It is by far my favorite comic book movie ever, and I highly recommend it to anyone who loves superhero movies and cape shit in general. But the point is, you gotta give me a specific Superman because not all of them are the same, not even all the good ones. And it's strange that there are people who point at characters like Bruce Wayne and say that they're Sues because, oh, well, he's rich, so that counts as being a Sue. Which is weird because it sounds like all Lily is saying is that any character who is cool and does cool things is a Mary Sue.
Elle Woods has this garbage boyfriend who ditches her for Harvard, so she transfers, runs circles around him through the entire movie, and solves a murder trial as an intern. The entire time it's just swagger, 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 swagger.
Okay, I guess that really is all she believes a Mary Sue is. Also, you're leaving out a lot of information. Again. Yeah, I watched Legally Blonde, and it's actually alright. You can definitely tell it's from the early 2000s, but not a bad B movie, all things considered. Anyway, Elle does a lot of impressive things, but unlike Ray and Carol, she earns those through extremely hard work. Even then, she still fails. Like, a lot. She works her ass off just to get into Harvard and impress her ex, only to find out that he still won't take her back because he's engaged to someone else. She even gets tricked into humiliating herself at a party. And the murder case at the end? She has to prove the client is innocent without providing the only alibi that can prove it because the victim believes that it will ruin her reputation. Don't even get me started on the climax of the movie, where she initially has to find a way to prove the witness of murder on the spot, at that moment when she has almost nothing to go on. Is this really the swagger you were talking about, Lily?
First of all, I would like to point out that, Miss Wyndham. Okay. So, Miss Wyndham.
Where is she going with this?
Without any context from the movie, the scenes you showed from Legally Blonde really don't make the point you think they do.
You got into Harvard Law?
What, like it's hard?
What are your backups?
I don't need backups. I'm going to Harvard.
Based on this, alone, without anything from the movie, she seems more like an annoying twat who happens to have everything go her way because she's just so talented and naturally gifted that nothing goes wrong. Because that's what I want to see in a movie. A character so insufferably talented, rather than someone who goes through hardships and overcomes them by the seat of her own wit and tenacity. You know, like most people do in life. Most of the people who get into Harvard at all still have to work for it. Do you think any of them would find it relatable about someone who actually found it easy? Watch this scene one more time.
You got into Harvard Law?
What, like it's hard?
Again, without watching the movie, you might think that she's aced her way into Harvard without difficulty because she's just that talented, and is rubbing it in like a smug bitch, and giving me the impression that every other trial will be as easy as that. But that's not the case, because including any other context wouldn't fit in Lily's argument. Elle worked her ass off to get into that university, and despite that, she still doesn't fully understand what's expected of her when she arrives, getting kicked out of her first class because she didn't do the necessary research. She's not bragging that getting into Harvard wasn't hard. She's saying that because she wants to impress her ex to win him back, which is another flaw that she has to work past. She's too clingy to this narcissistic douchebag and can't accept that she's far too good for him. And when she finally rejects him in the end, it's so satisfying because of all the hardship it took for her to get there. What you can't realize, Lily, is that all the characters you talked about, who people actually like, struggle much more than characters like Rey and Carol. The only reason you've conflated the rest of them with those two is because you cannot see why they fail, or why those failures are important to their stories. That, or you're just ignoring them. You think that because Rey and Carol act cool or do cool things, that is the reason people think they're Sues. As if people hate characters for being cool. And that's bullshit. And I know that's bullshit. And you know that's bullshit. And I know you know it's bullshit, because people love cool characters of any gender. But hyper-competent characters that either always succeed or never have meaningful failures are fucking boring. They give you nothing to engage with, nothing to be invested in, no stakes or meaningful conflicts except the ones it has to gaslight you into believing. The degree to which their character can be explored is damaged because they will rarely have those high-stakes situations that define their character, because they're too powerful for the stakes to get that high to begin with. The biggest problem with any bad video on Mary Sue's is that the essayist in question doesn't understand why people don't like Mary Sue's, or why the trope is so negative. Lily really does seem to think that any character that is just cool is automatically a Mary Sue, and that the ones who get criticized are exclusively the female characters, when there are dozens of cool female characters that people do like and aren't called Mary Sue's. Lily, if people are just calling any competent female character a Sue, then why don't you hear that for any of these characters? Because everyone who has ever used the term is going by a drastically different definition than Lily is. And given the lack of consensus on the definition, this is the clearest indication that Lily is off the mark. And I know it was said in Kaiser's video, but I genuinely think that this video was made purely out of spite, just because people don't like the characters that she does. Just half-assing a video without any attempt to understand the trope, or even the points of view she's arguing against. Or even bother to cite the points of view she's arguing against. But then again, a lot of her videos are focused on very clickbaity topics, so you couldn't really expect much more than that. Her video doesn't even explain why these kinds of characters are good, she just insists that they are. Like, sure, Lily, let's suppose that all these characters that you listed off are Mary Sue's. Why is that a good thing? How do you look at the most controversial deleted scene in a Marvel movie and not even attempt to explain why you think it's good? That's not rhetorical, by the way. The answer is you can't, because she's not trying to convince anyone. Not like you could make a good argument for why a superhero assaulting a rando over something so trivial is a good thing, but it's all the more reason why this video feels like it was made out of spite. She doesn't want to explain a point, she just wants to do what anyone does when arguing that these characters are good. Call you sexist for saying you don't like them while ignoring all the female characters that disprove her point.
See, one problem with this discourse is that, like most trees of bullshit, it sprouts from a seed of truth.
Oh, shit, is she actually about to criticize Carol? I genuinely didn't think she was going to do that. Enlighten us, Lily. What is it about Captain Marvel that makes her so underwhelming?
As fun as Captain Marvel is, one significant problem with her character is that 90% of the time she shows up, she's a cold, emotionless robot.
That's actually true. Lily is being correct in a video for once? How did she do that? Wait, no, let's hear the rest.
Despite her solo film being about going crazy and unrestrained, her appearance in Endgame is a lot more reserved and stoic. She emotes less, she's got a permanent scowl, most of the swagger from her initial appearance is gone.
Okay, there it is. So you say that 90% of the time she's on screen, she's devoid of emotion, but then cite the movie where only 10% of her screen time has been devoted to. I mean, I guess it was too much to expect her to actually try criticizing her sacred cow, but... Alright, what's next?
In her solo film, she has a lot more personality. She's angrier, she's sarcastic, she's really cute with her daughter, even though she can't remember her. She's got this grunge vibe going on. She breaks a guy's hand and robs him when he tells her to smile. It's fucking great.
You are a horrible person. That's what it says. A horrible person. We weren't even testing for that.
Endgame was filmed first, and because she had a very small role in it, Carol's actual character wasn't worked out very much.
Lily, Carol's character has never been worked out very much. Everything you just listed was a personality trait, not a character trait. Because Carol doesn't actually have a character. Sure, the story insists that she has one, but none that is explored. The only character traits that she has are the most superficial attempts at replicating the kinds of snark that we see from other beloved characters, and it's completely at odds with her supposed conflict with the loss of her memory. Yeah, sure, you're just having an existential breakdown, but sure, let's just joke and quip like nothing is going on. Not like there's much conflict to begin with. The movie won't show us how she feels about some of the actually conflicting things about her actions. Like, how does she feel about having to fight with her teammates who she's supposedly spent many years with? Or how she's responsible for killing a fuck ton of Skrulls who were apparently innocent at all this? Or the idea that if the person she admired so much was a Kree turned rogue, does that mean any one of the people she's fighting in the end could possibly also go rogue if only they were given the chance? Nah, fuck them all! All Kree are evil, you know, except that one, just ignore her. Who needs that kind of nuance in a dumb action movie, am I right? It's not like you put Superman on your list of Mary Sues. He's never had to deal with choosing when to use his power, when not to, and how. Delicately maintaining that balance so as not to kill someone who wasn't guilty. And that certainly wouldn't be the most interesting thing about him if he had. No, Carol is above that pesky thing you call morality. You know, that thing that makes characters less interesting and less cool. Like, the great irony to Captain Marvel is that it has a really cool concept. You have an obscenely powerful hero, put in a situation where she has unreliable memories, caught between two alien factions that are both capable of deceiving her in one way or another, and they mindfuck her for the entire story, preventing her from using her full power, gaslighting her while she's mentally vulnerable, then forcing herself to hold back from using her full power because she has to moralize over how to use those powers in her quest to find out who's lying, who's telling the truth, if anyone is at all, never knowing who the real enemy is and trying desperately not to let that deceit trick her into making the wrong choices. Instead, the story just embraces this gung-ho, irresponsible, and warped morality, even though she ends up killing people who are innocent in all this. And she just doesn't fucking care. Then again, that does sound like the kind of person who'd mercilessly beat up a guy and steal his bike just because he asked her to smile. You know, Lily, it says a lot about the kind of person who likes this, but for some reason I feel like it says exponentially more about you. Okay, that pretty much covers Carol. What about Rey?
They pivoted away from that and pulled back on Rey's character and spent the next movie burying her in reasons not to pop Space Elliot Rogers' head like a grape.
She's so close. She's so close to begin to understand. Now ask yourself, Lily, why would they try to pull back on a character that was this powerful and prevent her from just killing the main villain from the get-go?
Rey's character isn't bland because she was made to appeal to quote-unquote woke scolds. Her character is bland because she was made to appeal to them. The entire trilogy started on a good note and then backpedaled on most of it in the name of pleasing fandom racists and misogynists.
Why did I even ask that question expecting you'd give a sensible answer? No! That is not the reason! Where were these racists and misogynists at the height of the sequel trilogy's popularity, which you remember being a part of?
Like, I remember the reaction of The Force Awakens. It was a wild time. Jedi Stormpilot was the most popular ship, everyone was wondering who Rey's parents were and missing the point, Rey was consistently characterized as a feral gremlin Jedi who probably doesn't shower.
They didn't change her character to appeal to far-right douchebags. That's retarded. Lily, you answered your own question earlier.
They pivoted away from that and pulled back on Rey's character and spent the next movie burying her in reasons not to pop Space Elliot Rogers' head like a grape.
Kylo is the main antagonist throughout the trilogy for Rey and the source of her conflict. So if she curb stomps that conflict in the first movie, what do you think that tells the audience? It says that the conflict is a joke, and the entire story that conflict revolves around should be treated as such. Assuming we even get more of a story, because if the conflict is ended in the first movie, I seriously doubt they would have lasted another movie and a half. I like characters who do awesome things, but you act like there isn't a balance to maintain the viewer's investment by not invalidating the entire premise of these films. Pretty much all stories that aren't even about fighting someone or something have some form of moral, social, internal, or metaphysical conflict, because that's what the people want to see the character overcome. really try to name a good story without any conflict whatsoever. I challenge you to do that, and for each one you name, I will name 5 more, and plenty others that are better than all of the ones you can think of. Stories are built on conflict, so if you're going to downplay the conflict and treat the cause of that conflict as irrelevant, you lampshade one of the foundations of your story. That is why they gave every reason for Rey not to kill Kylo, cause then they wouldn't have a story. That's exactly the problem with the Mary Sue, and that's exactly what you're taking issue with here, Lily. Don't get me wrong, I can sympathize with wanting the sequels to end much faster. But why is that something you want?
Every time she shows up, she should have Devil May Cry music backing her.
I am the storm that is approaching.
Okay, that pretty much answers my question. Folks, at the end of the day, I find Lily's views on writing to be especially shallow for someone who talks about it so much. She just wants characters to do cool things. It doesn't matter if it comes at the expense of the story, the conflict, or even the action figures that she loves some... I mean characters. I meant to say characters. The characters that she loves so much. So long as they do things that tickle that dopamine receptor, that's all that matters to her. I mean, what else could you say about someone who looks at the scene where Rey thinks she killed Chewbacca and tells her to lighten up because her dark force powers that murdered a bunch of innocent prisoners makes her cool, actually?
Like, come on, girl, where's the flair? You can shoot lightning from your fucking fingertips, and you're angsting about that? Lady, you're fucking cool!
Yeah, I don't think I need to say anything else. Lily's views on these characters are childish. She just is a child. She doesn't want to understand why certain characters are considered Sues and others aren't. She sees the term as just another buzzword with no meaning. But when dozens of other people use the term meaningfully, she ignores it. And that's the problem that has only fueled these kinds of stories with these kinds of characters.
People will claim they hate Mary Sues because that's a snarl word on the internet for teenage girls having fun. But take that term out of the equation, it's clear people don't hate them as much as they claim they do. If anything, they love them.
The term, much like all literary terms, is just a way to identify the kinds of problems that are prolific with these characters. Those problems are still there even if we didn't have the term. Characters like Rey, like Carol, like Kirito, are still so overpowered they invalidate the conflicts they're a part of. Any conflict that isn't underplayed has to be artificialized to create the illusion that anything is driving the story forward. They barely have any character. At best, they'll have some notable personality or moments that can distract from that. And they can't do anything wrong because even when they do, they'll still just be treated like a hero for it. Though I mainly say that about Carol. Needless to say, Lily doesn't even understand these characters, much less what makes them Mary Sues or not. And now that I've shown you what the trope means in context, maybe you'll... Young Kaiser from the up-and-coming YouTube channel Kaiser Shounen, what are you doing here?
Okay, Pete, you gotta see some... What do you mean?
Well, why are you here?
So, you clout chase on my channel on a video covering the same topic you're talking about right now, and now I'm here in a video that you made, reading the script that you wrote, and you don't know why I'm here?
No idea.
Okay, I'm gonna ignore that. Look, point is, you need to see this. A little birdie let me know about something.
Wait, no, hold on. Lily's talked about Mary Sues before? Is it still on YouTube?
Nah, I checked everywhere I could before I got here. No dice.
And there's one place left to search. Oh my god.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Okay, so let's put the skits and pleasantries aside. I had finished up the recording for this video, and I had only just started editing it when Kaiser came to me with this.
Someone had commented on our previous video about another video where Lily had talked about the Mary Sue back in the olden days of 2018. If I wasn't a robot, I would totally feel very old right now. It took us a bit of time to actually find the videos where she talked about it in the past, but it was very enlightening relative to Lily's current stance on the subject, and especially revealing of the kinds of double standards she holds in her new video.
In her video, Lily posits the term Mary Sue is useless jargon and its usage is self-defeating. If you can explain what you believe is wrong with a character, there's no need to use a shorthand to describe them.
It's a meaningless jargon on its own. TV Tropes has an entire thesis written on the concept because that's how much elaboration
explanation the term inherently requires in order for people to get it. As a result, in any critical discussion about a character, it would be more valuable to just use the explanation that suits the character and drop the jargon entirely. If you know why a character is a Mary Sue, then just fucking say that.
She says this, and then goes on to categorize, sometimes even criticize, characters with shorthand terminology, and without explanation of her own.
Poorly written character? Hello, Luke. Cliched character? Hello, every chosen one ever, and every hero's journey ever, and every everyman ever. Author avatar? Hello, Kreia. Idealized character? Hello, vast majority of male protagonists that aren't edgy white boys. Power fantasy? Hello, entire Eastern animation industry. Infallible character who isn't allowed to be wrong despite constantly being wrong? Hello, Old Testament Jehovah.
What do you mean by poorly written characters, Lily? What do you mean by a cliche character? What do you mean by an everyman or the author avatar, idealized character, etc, etc, etc? If you know why these characters are these things, then why aren't you just saying those reasons, man? Why use all these buzzwords that don't mean anything, that clearly have never been overused by any asshole on Twitter before? Am I being rhetorical? Yes. Yes, I am. And I'm not apologizing. The reason why she isn't doing that, of course, is because of the same reason why people still use the term Mary Sue. Because the whole point of words in any language is to boil down their meanings to allow for better communications. A single word can describe an entire concept that is public knowledge in the public lexicon, so that people that know what you're talking about can easily grasp what you're saying, and we can move on with the discussion from there. But apparently, basic English is a bad thing when it comes to the terms she doesn't like. You couldn't get more two-faced if your name was Harvey Dent.
If we had to explain everything we say in no other form except raw and unrefined data, it would honestly be more effective to communicate if we just made screeching monkey noises at each other all day. This is why we have a word to describe the Mary Sue, so we don't have to say the descriptors that make a character a Mary Sue every time we want to label them as such. Lily knows this, hence why she used shorthand to describe all of these other characters in her examples. Besides, in videos that talk about Rey or Korra that call her a Mary Sue, how many times don't you hear a follow-up to those claims with reasons that explain why? I would argue that the majority of the times when you don't hear evidence supporting the claim are in videos where that isn't the topic of the discussion, just like Lily's examples are here. And so long as people who talk about the trope are qualifying what they mean by Mary Sue, then not only isn't there anything wrong with using the term, but it would be more efficient to do so. I mean, you haven't been ignoring the qualifiers people have used when talking about the trope, have you, Lily? You haven't just been talking shit about positions you claim to know about and yet have never actually listened to, have you, Lily?
Yeah, shit like this is why I'm calling this bitch a straight up liar. There is no way that you could honestly contradict yourself this much by mistake and just be too stupid or uninformed to know about the greater conversation surrounding the Mary Sue trope. I am willing to bet my balls that for every video that just calls a character a Mary or Gary Stu and just moves on from the topic, because we're talking about critics, Lily, that's what you said. There are at least 20 videos that actually explain it to you word for word, bar for bar. And I have the playlist to prove it.
The Mary Sue does have a meaning, and one that is valuable to know as a problematic trope in writing, as evident by some videos on my channel and many others that talk about it elsewhere. This is why it's frustrating to hear people talk about it like a buzzword when it loses all meaning because of people like Lily. People who would rather pretend it has no meaning than explore what it really means. How come she's never asked herself why people have a problem with a character of a certain level of hypercompetency? Could a character that is favored significantly by the plot create problems with that plot? And are those problems the same ones that people have with the Mary Sue? Well, the funny thing is that I don't believe she hasn't asked these questions because, as it turns out, she knows exactly what the Mary Sue is.
Historically speaking, characters that closely resemble a Mary Sue have one key problem that isn't even related to the character's design itself. Namely, they go unchallenged by the plot.
Oh my god. She actually gets it! She knows what the Mary Sue is! Sure, it's an unrefined definition, but it's not far off from what a lot of other people have said about the trope.
It's not a character problem, it's a story problem. A novice writer has dropped a character into the world that is overwhelmingly capable, and the conflict of the story is not balanced around that. Hence, the character is able to run around chopping the heads off gods with absolutely nobody thinking such a thing is out of place.
Wait a second, play that back.
It's not a character problem, it's a story problem.
Does this sound familiar?
A Mary Sue isn't just a character, because a character can be equipped with all manner of skills and powers. It all depends on how they are treated by the plot.
She basically said exactly what Literature Devil did.
Now that is irony!
It's certainly a lot closer than her understanding in her more recent video. Nothing in this definition has anything to do with sexism, racism, or bigotry, contrary to what she's claimed today. She even goes into detail about an overpowered character she wrote and why she believes they aren't a Mary Sue. I won't play the entire clip, but in essence, my understanding is that the character is extremely powerful and could end the conflict whenever they want to. But due to moral reasons and other factors, the conflict isn't undermined by them. This is not too different from Superman versus the Elite. Superman could kill the Elite whenever he wants to, but there is a lot more going on than just a physical conflict. There's a moral conflict going on in this story, and it's arguably even more prominent than the inevitable cage match between these 5 superhumans.
So, to recap, it's not a buzzword, she knows it's not a buzzword, but she pretends that it is anyway. But why? Why spread misinformation about a trope while adding to the confusion surrounding its meaning instead of setting the record straight and letting people know what the true meaning is so that they can call out when it's being used incorrectly? Hanlon's razor says never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. But you know what? Fuck all that. Bitch, you know better. You can't say the trope has no meaning or that you never heard a non-sexist definition when you yourself gave one 6 years ago. And the maliciousness doesn't stop there, people, because it's shadowboxing season again. More sweeping statements that are so aggressive she scare off the pit bulls.
Boring men in fandom were constantly obsessed with what they called a plague of Mary Sues. It was a stupid argument for cranky little bitches who can't have fun. And while it has different definitions and criteria based on the year, fandom, and how much of an irrational dickweed the litmus test maker is at any given moment, so the complaint is that Dickhead A wants to read about the canon characters, and gamers are a simple-minded bunch, where not only are you gonna have a greasy bearded fuck yelling about how this is somehow an infection of society, you'll also get an equally greasy bearded fuck yelling about how this is capitalism polluting feminism. He's an idiot and he's evil, but he's obviously so. You joyless little bitch. Her solo movie still got angry detractors, but far fewer phony socialists and far more open neo-Nazis. The entire trilogy started on a good note, and then backpedaled on most of it in the name of pleasing fandom racists and misogynists. Let people enjoy things, and yet the people who most frequently say that are so utterly without joy.
You're a fucking asshole.
I can't prove anything, but I have some suspicions. At the tail end of her explanation regarding her fanfictions, she says this.
So by all reasonable critical measures, these characters are not Mary Sues because they don't break the story. The story is built so they will fit. But that doesn't matter. They can beat up your favorite characters, which means they definitely are in the minds of the kind of people who actually read and comment on a fanfic instead of just write one.
In the minds of people who comment on a fanfic. So, this doesn't have anything to do with the trope.
So I get a lot of people asking me, I want to make an OC for my fan work, but how do I keep them from becoming too Mary Sue-ish? The answer to that is you can't. Your character is just as likely to be called a Mary Sue for having an unusual name as they are for literally being a demigod.
I said this near the end of Kaiser's video, and I still stand by it now. Her problem isn't with the Mary Sue trope or its usage in discussion. I truly believe this is just Lily being mad at a couple of idiots who didn't like her fanfic and called her OC a Mary Sue. And apparently she's still mauling over it 6 years later.
Pete, my friend, I owe you a big apology. I didn't believe Lily could ever be that sad.
Don't sell yourself short, Kaiser. I don't have time to make another I told you so video.
Fuck you, I was right! Fuck you, I was right!
I ran into that one, didn't I?
I can't prove that's actually what's going on, but it would make a lot of sense. Spreading misinformation about an already misunderstood trope is certainly a lot easier than actually qualifying why Carol or Rey aren't bad, which she's already admitted she doesn't want to do anyway.
And that's why trying to argue what X character isn't a Mary Sue is a waste of time, because you're arguing against the wrong thing. You could make a detailed analysis for why, say, Captain Marvel isn't an overpowered Mary Sue, but you're making a critical mistake because that's not what the unshaven douchebag is actually angry about.
Especially when the best you can do is, oh, these characters are just so cool and they do cool things.
When the response to, this character is a Mary Sue should be, yeah, I know, it's fucking great.
He's got a backpack and he flies! He can shoot a wire out of his forearm and he's so cool and mysterious, he wears a mask!
And misinformation is never a good thing to spread, but it's especially frustrating when it's this trope in particular. I talked about this trope in detail in the past because content creators like Lily aren't helping to fix that misunderstanding and instead make things worse. And to add injury to injury, she does this knowing what the trope is and what it's referring to, but deliberately paints the trope as a sexist buzzword.
This shit doesn't help anyone, and it's only going to produce more bad stories, because when the standard is limitless, when there is no standard to put any writers to in regards to tropes or whatever else, the obvious conclusion is that they're going to pull the same dumb crap over and over and over and over again. All of this for what? 'Cause you're bitter? Because despite being a grown-ass 31-year-old woman, you are so bothered by some randos commenting on your My Little Pony fanfiction that you are willing to go scorched earth on an entire trope and make it meaningless? You know what? If that's the case, cry about it. Oh, and when you're done crying about it, I hope you cry again. Harder. All she showed in her video is that she just wants more cool characters that do cool things and to ignore criticism where Mary Sue is used correctly. But here's the funny thing about tropes, Lillian. You can change the words all you want, but you can never take the meaning. You can never take that from anyone. It doesn't matter if they're called Mary Sues or not. These characters still fit the mold, and they still harm the stories they touch. And they still come from the same bad writing insecurities and habits. Whether you call them Mary Sues, Gary Stews, Carol Danverses, Ray Palpatines, Ryan Goslings, Kiritos, Jesus Yamatos, or Shiro Emiya.
Wait, what was that last one? Did you just spoil what my next video is about?
Subscribe to Kaiser Shounen. Peace out.
Well, fuck.